Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in. I'm Robbie.
I'm Jason.
And welcome to the table. We are so excited to have you guys here. Episode 21. We're a full-grown adult-aged podcast. We've reached that. Jason, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. It's funny, you thought about adult age, and I thought about playing blackjack, which I guess is a bit of both because you can gamble. I think you can gamble before you're 21, but it's same principle. Yeah. So 21.
I think if you're in international waters, maybe that's the case. Maybe like inside the States, I don't know. Yeah. I do remember my first ever cruise being 18 and my dad being like, we can go to the roulette table, and if you want to make some bets, you can. You don't have to like make them through me anymore. Yeah. It's like, wow, okay, that's funny. This is crazy. But yeah, so here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Super excited to be recording an episode where we're somewhat back to a standard flow. I don't know that we've recorded an episode. It's been over a month since we recorded on our traditional recording time. So pretty excited to dive in. Jason, what games have you been playing lately?
Man, I've actually played a ton, which has been good between Ryder being home because he's home for the summer, and we had a Hunter, one of our good friends. His brother came over and we played. He had lost his gaming group, and they came over and we actually played Quacks and For Sale, two of the games we talked about. I'm not going to talk about those today though. I played two games, one that I knew I loved and just don't play enough, and then another one that lots of people love, but it may not stay in the collection. I'll jump with it first. So it's called Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. So we played Terraforming Mars, right? Yeah, we played Terraforming Mars.
Yeah, we did.
Terraforming Mars at its heart is a card game. For those who've played it and those who heard us talk about it, you're getting resources to play cards, and those cards become an engine and do different things. Now, granted, you're taking actions to put cities on a board or putting you're building plants or tree spaces on the board. So you're doing things like that. And Ares Expedition, essentially, is Terraforming Mars, the card game. I say that because it's interesting because Terraforming Mars is cards, but the basics of Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition, which is a smaller version of Terraforming Mars, you're still playing cards. But the coolest hook about this, and it's in other games, but there's 5 different actions that can be taken. We all have the same 5 action cards. You privately select which one you want to take that round, and everybody who chooses that action gets to take whatever action you choose. Everybody gets to take that. So maybe this time I want to play the card that lets me build blue or red buildings. And then, or you can play the card that lets you do green buildings. Play the card that lets you produce. Because in traditional Terraforming Mars, at the end of the round, everyone produces. But in Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, I'll just start calling it Ares Expedition. When you produce, everyone produces. The cool thing is, if you played the card you played, you have a bonus because you played that card, right? So everybody gets to produce, but then you get something extra for that action. So for like in the green card, I forgot what it's called, but basically you can play it to play your green cards, but then you can do it for a 3 mega credit, 3 money discount. Super cool. It comes from a game called Race for the Galaxy, that exact action does, but I love you're kind of playing other people. Well, they produced last time, so they're not going to produce this time. And I don't know if they need to produce. They have a lot of money, but I really need to produce, so I'm going to play production this time. Or I have all this money. I really need to get a green card out, so I may do that. The other cool thing is you can't play the same card. You can't choose the same action twice in a row. So if I played the production card, it stays face up in front of me. So now on my next turn, I have to play one of my other 4 action cards. And again, we all have the same 5 action cards. It's fun. A lot of the hardcore reviewers out there said they won't play Terraforming Mars anymore because this gives you the fun of Terraforming Mars. But these are like, we talk about content creators who've played 30 or 40 games of Terraforming Mars. I haven't played that many in person. And so I understand why they say, because it gives them the fun or the feels of basically playing a bunch of cards. And like I said, Terraforming Mars is essentially about playing cards. Like in a regular game, you're going to play 20 or 30 or 40 cards during that game. And that's what's a lot of fun. Ares Expedition, I got it. It was crazy. It was a Kickstarter thing, but then because the crazy world was of COVID, it ended up getting to Target and Walmart and places at the same time it was being delivered, and it got really cheap. So I actually have the Kickstarter deluxe version for like $20. It sits in my collection, but after we played the other day, Ryder and I played it, and we're like, yeah, it's fun, but I'd rather play Terraforming Mars, right? So, but for those who play Terraforming Mars, it doesn't shorten the time a ton. So you would think, oh, it's a card game version of it. It really doesn't shorten it a lot because it shortens it a little bit, but it doesn't shorten as much as you would think, for sure. In a 5-player game, it would shorten it a lot, but in a 2-player game, it still took us about an hour and a half to play that game, and Ryder and I play fairly fast.
Yeah.
So it's one that I doubt we ever play it because I have so many other games I'd rather show you, Robbie, and now you play Terraform Mars. But if anybody ever offers it to it, you would have fun playing with it because you're playing cards to do stuff, right? It's a lot of fun, massive stack of cards. That's one of the 2 games we played. And it'll stay in the collection because I can't resell it for any real money because there's so many copies in the world. So it'll always just kind of hang out here. The other one I played, and I think I shot you a text of this, was one called Raccoon Tycoon. Yeah. At its heart, it's an auction game. And in that auction game, I think I even did a post on a Bards of the Board Instagram page. The basics of the game is you can play a card that you either take 3 of the resources listed at the bottom, and the resources are like coal or wood or wheat or some other stuff. If you take 3 of those resources and there's resources listed at the top, the card shows 2 different boxes on it. Resource at the top, you're raising the price of things at the top. It may not be what you took. So if you're taking items, playing this card to take items, then you're raising the price of other items. It may be the same, it may not be that. So that's one of the actions you can take. It's quick, snappy turns. On your turn, you can take 1 of 5 actions. One of them is taking items. One of them is selling your existing items. So say the price of wheat has raised to $7 a token, basically. You can sell as many tokens as you want for that money, because another action you can do is to buy a town, which just gives you in-game points. And another action you can do is to buy railroads. That becomes an auction. So like your goal at the end of the game is to have as many buildings, railroads, and towns as you could have. There's points tied to all those. You're getting those 3 things with money that you get from selling your items that you've purchased during the game. There's a good chance after we play it together that Raccoon Tycoon could be a Bards one, because that sounds like a lot. But there's 5 actions, and the action is quick. Like on your turn, you take a single action and you're done. And then you take an action and you're done. You take an action and you're done. And now it's back to you. The one action that is super cool in this, other than the raising the price and selling stuff, is that railroads are auctioned every single time. So if I want to buy a building, I can just spend money to buy a building. If I want to buy a town, I can just turn resources in to buy a town. Or there's an auction, and if it's my turn, I'm going to start an auction for this. And I have to bid the minimum price on the card. And so anyone else who wants to bid can raise it. But if they don't, I buy that. If someone else wins that card, it's still my turn. And I can now start another auction, or I can just take a regular action. We haven't played enough to kind of figure out that mechanism, because Ryder had an ability that gave him money with every auction. Elizabeth ran away with it because she got money early. But I just love that the turns, even the auction turns, are super quick. You know, I'm very much a fast player. And on your turn, there's not really a lot. I'm either going to take, I'm going to sell. 5 different things, but the action you take is like literally like a few seconds. Okay, I'm going to sell this. Here's your $22. Then it's Ryder's turn. Then it's my turn. It's Elizabeth's turn. Oh, she's going to buy a building, pay her money, Ryder's turn. I mean, it's so fast. And even though the game was like an hour and 20 minutes, it didn't feel like it took an hour and 20 minutes, because you're always doing something on your turn. That's Raccoon Tycoon. I was happy because I bought the retail version for like $20 a couple years ago. And then when the local game store that closed down here the week we moved here was selling off all their inventory, and they had the deluxe Kickstarter version for like $25. So the version I have just has fancy paper money and some fancier tokens and stuff, is the deluxe version, just because I was able to buy used at a going out of business kind of place. Raccoon Tycoon definitely moved. After we played it moved very quickly to the top of the list of ones we'll play with you your next time here, because I truly think it could be a Bards thing, because there's a lot, but we haven't really gone deep into the auction mechanism yet. So that's the 2 games I've been playing, Robbie. 2 of the games I've been playing a ton, but those 2 are the ones that kind of rose to the top.
Yeah, Ares Expedition sounds so interesting to me, because when I played Terraforming Mars with Jason and Elizabeth, we got to the end and it was like, okay, I'm cooking. I'm doing a lot. Like my card engine was really successful. The cost was my card engine, I would argue, was more effective for trying to earn points than either Jason or Elizabeth's. But the reason being is because Elizabeth's exact words were, Robbie, it's called Terraforming Mars.
Yeah,
you forgot to terraform, because we looked down at the board where you're supposed to be adding these pieces, and I just didn't. I think I only added like 2 spaces on the whole board. So Ares Expedition sounds.
Yeah,
I think I would
enjoy
right.
That.
I think that would be up there.
That's true. That's very true.
Or, maybe next time I play Terraforming Mars, I'll just actually terraform
Mars.
It would be an idea. that might help me win. No, that sounds like a blast. I love, there truly is. I like that we kind of just shop these lists. Like, I'm not back up in Lynchburg until August, but it's fun because of this podcast and just Jason and I talking almost every day. Like, oh yeah, it kind of builds the anticipation and the excitement for our trips of, oh, I'm looking forward to that one. I'm looking forward to showing you this one. Like, it'll be a good time. So on our end of things, we actually just had a board game cafe open locally. Jason, I don't know if I told you about that or if you saw it.
No.
We have one in Pelham, I want to say. It's Pelham or Helena, one of the two. It's called Valhalla Gaming. Just opened June 1st. So it's brand new. So
Very
looking forward to
cool.
getting out there. Lindsay actually said, hey, we should go check it out one weekend. And I was like, yes, we should. If she's throwing it out there, it's going to be great. My wife's been really tired lately, so haven't had the chance to play a whole lot of games around our house. But we did get a Villainous night in because Jason texted me about Villainous. And Villainous is, as someone who loves villains in general, and I'm a Disney fan myself, I love Villainous. I love the variance that Villainous brings because we own every expansion of traditional Villainous. Now, Jason and I were talking because he and his family played as well about like the pros and cons of the Star Wars and Marvel versus the traditional Villainous games. So I'll always love Villainous. I love the asynchronous powers. I love the idea that like there are some villains that are easier to win with than others. So very interesting there. We do not mind Take That at our house at all. And if you are not a Take That fan, like if you avoid that, Villainous, you're playing villains.
Yes.
So unsurprisingly, you do have to strike at the other people. And what's really cool about that is that it almost feels like the game designers had like you in mind with this, Jason, because they were like, people may not like Take That, which was shocking to me when I came across like more and more board gamers that aren't Take That fans.
Right.
Because that's just not my friend group at all. We are vicious. And so when you fate, that's the Take That action to someone else. So you're almost playing single player solitaire, and the fate action is someone messes up your board, but there is a fate deck that is specific to your villain. So if you're playing Captain Hook, Peter Pan, Wendy, the Lost Boys, John, Michael, they all end up in your board, and it's like a specific fate deck to them. But if you go to Ursula, then Prince Eric and Ariel, they are messing with you. So I like that variant. So it's a fun Take That world, because that's how, if you're not a villain lover, you have to do a Take That action in order for you to see the heroes that you're playing with.
Right.
You'll never get Simba unless you fate Scar.
Right.
So super interesting on that side of things. Does that, like, I know we talked about that. Is that something you've ever thought about, like, on the Take That side of it? Do you think that there was some thought there as a not Take That guy, Jason?
I think the way you described it, I think what's interesting in the Disney world, right? It's all about princes and princesses in the fairy tales, and the villains get a bad rap, but it's always the villain, like the villain events at Disney are always the fun ones, right? We had just moved to Tampa, and now they do like a pay for event, but like the first one they ever had at Hollywood Studios was like, and I forgot what it's called, but it was open for any just ticket holders, and the parking lot actually sold out. Like we had to park at the Dolphin and Swan and walk over, and it was still the coolest night we'd ever had because Facilier was just walking around, and all those really cool villains who we all like, even though maybe we don't publicly say it, but you will happily publicly say it, that we like these villains. And it was just one of the coolest nights we'd ever gone to Hollywood Studios. Crazy packed. But Oogie Boogie, okay, you may know that because if you're a Nightmare Before Christmas fan, Facilier pick all kinds of villains that were just walking around the park, right? They don't do it anymore. It's like, because it was chaos, but it was, there is that, excitement about the villains, right? And having a game that does that makes sense. And having that game be a Take That game totally makes sense as well. And then I like the way you described it really well, because it doesn't always conceptualize, but if you really want to see your favorite heroes, you have to go through the fate deck. And often you got to go through the fate deck to win the game anyway, because you got to do heroes have to do certain things, right? Depending on which character you are. But if you really want to go through those heroes, all those characters you like to see, it's fun to have that fate deck there. My feedback has always been the art's amazing. I love Disney as well, and Star Wars and the MCU from a Marvel perspective. And so seeing all those characters is just very cool. And pulling those cards is very cool, especially on the Star Wars side. Like I played Ultron, and Ultron, it does go deep into actually the comic book side of the house, because there were characters in Ultron's deck I had no clue, because I didn't read Avenger stuff from a comic books perspective. I'm much more of a DC person. Now, whenever they get DC villainous, it's off the hook. But I will say this, right? I always want villainous to be better than it is, and it takes a little too long for what it is. And sure. I do not take that. Like in my family, like because they always gang up on me, and that wasn't quite the case. We were being quite nice to each other, and like evenly distributing the fate. Because the difference, and Robbie may kind of explained it, but like in a traditional villainous, I have a fate deck fully assigned to me, so I have to decide I'm going to fate Elizabeth and attack her, right? But in Marvel Villainous specifically, is the one that I played, it's a common fate deck. And Robbie and I were talking about this, and I like the idea of having the choice, but it takes away the balance. And Ryder said the same thing, because I was texting Robbie with that, and then I mentioned Robbie. I mentioned to Ryder, and Ryder totally agreed. He does not like the common fate deck. But conversely, too, now you're just kind of going through the deck, hoping to see a character, hoping to have something, and it's actually less thematic in my mind than traditional villainous, because like you said, if you're going for Captain Hook, you know what people you expect to see in that deck. Or if you're going through the common fate deck, okay, yeah, you may see Captain America or Thor, but you may never see Wasp, because Wasp is attached to someone else. So I took way too much of your time there, Robbie, but like I just played villainous as well, so it's on our mind. Yeah. I will say this, as much as I may not rate it very high, every villainous is out there I have bought or will eventually buy. I just saw there's one out with there's an expansion that's been released that has King Candy in there. King Candy from Wreck-It Ralph. Yeah. I'm like, I want to have that for sure. Or like I don't have that one for sure. I even have the Oogie Boogie single expansion. We haven't opened it, but it's just a single character expansion. It's sitting up in there. It's sitting up in the closet right now. So it's the only true game stuff I collect, because I'm a Disney guy, Star Wars guy, and by proxy a Marvel guy as well. So it's a game that I highly recommend for new players to play. Like I may poo-poo on it a little bit or not give it high praise. If you're a Disney fan, Star Wars fan, and Marvel fan, absolutely get them, because you're going to love it, because it is so cool. Yeah. If you're not a fan of any of those three IPs, I would stay away from Villainous.
Yeah, I would say after you exceed 4, the game, the way the game's built, I think it plays up to 6. But the game at 5 players institutes a fate token, which essentially means that like you cannot fate the same person back to back. Yep. We, as a Crawford House rule, because we play this game a lot, we introduce a lot of people to it. We add the fate token in at 4, because at 4 it can really draw out the game, because if someone gets close, all 3 people can just dogpile that person and everyone fates them, and you've set them back like 5 turns at least. So it really draws it out. Whereas the fate token means that like you kind of have to have this coordinated effort to go for it. So that makes the games go significantly faster. So the pace of Villainous is one of the biggest drawbacks of the game. I wouldn't be shocked if we end up doing Villainous one day, like the base game of Villainous as a game here. Just because the IP is so rich, and I actually do think it's a very good beginner entry game. But I want to, before we dive in to discuss today's game, which is another very, very beginner friendly game, want to talk about reviews, because we have some updates. Cool. We have had one extra review on Spotify. So Spotify's up to 29, which feels great. Here's the goal, listeners. I'm gonna put this out there. The goal is that the reviews stay ahead of episodes we are on. If that, like, does that make sense, Jason, what I'm saying here?
It makes sense.
So, like, I would love we're on episode 21. And so I would love for the reviews to continue. So we're at 29 on Spotify and we're at 26 on Apple Podcasts. So Apple Podcasts actually jumped. We've gotten 6 in the last 2 episodes.
Cool.
So way to go, y'all. That's phenomenal. Wanted to read one of them here, which is UJBVGGHIIGJGFG. Yeah, that's a random name, unless you want to tell me that has some context to it. But the great podcast I listen to, I love the cookie rating, and I've been using it since listening. Keep up the great work, guys. Can't wait to hear more.
Nice.
The cookie rating is something that we thought about before we even filmed our first episode. We love to eat cookies. Cookies are always discussed while we're playing. And at this point, even when we're together, we play a new game for the first time. I feel like we drop a cookie rating.
Yep.
Almost like a gut reaction of like, oh, how'd you feel about I think right now I'm settling it here. And truly for me, I find that lots of games, my initial cookie rating is almost always lower than where it actually lands.
Yep.
Because I'm a processor. I like to play the game over and over again. But today's game was actually one that I immediately not only knew I loved, I gave a high rating to in my head, and I ended up purchasing because I knew it would resonate so well. But just a reminder why we push those reviews. When we reach 50 reviews on Apple Podcasts, we have a copy of Quacks of Quedlinburg that we're going to give away to listeners. When we reach 50 reviews on Spotify, we have another copy of Quacks of Quedlinburg that we're going to give away. So if you have a Spotify account and you've been listening, there are over 100 of you listening on podcast platforms every single week. If you haven't dropped a review, it would mean the world to us. It helps get us in more ears of more new people to come join and listen. And it costs you nothing. That's the best part.
Yep.
It's an easy way to support what we're doing here. If you're a visual watcher, we appreciate you on the YouTube channel. A like and a subscribe goes so much farther than you know. So super, super grateful. Jason, we're talking Dog Park today. Dog Park. What a beautiful game. What a beautiful time. Tell our listeners a little bit about this game.
For sure, man. Happy to do so. So yeah, Dog Park. I will preface this by saying a lot of people said it's the wingspan of dogs. It's kind of in that adjacency world, like between the artwork and the gameplay. Not quite as complicated. So let's dig a little deeper. So it was released in 2022. Now that released in 2022, it was the Kickstarter delivery, so it wasn't quite a wide release. They did a rerun of the Kickstarter. Like I was back and forth on the original Kickstarter. I wanted to get the reviews out, so I didn't back the first one. And when the reviews came out where they did, I was like, oh yeah. As soon as they did an expansion and redid the original Kickstarter with the deluxe version, I was all in all the way. Released in 2022, designed by Jack and Lottie Hazel. That may be the southern way to say it. Maybe Hazel because they're British. So, but it's their first game they've designed, their first game they've published, and is actually inspired by their English Springer Spaniel, which I think is awesome. Published by Birdwood Games, which is actually their company. They've that was the first game they've published. They've published another smaller game called Forever Home that's dog related as well. The base game comes 2 to 4 players and plays in about 40 to 80 minutes, which I would say is pretty accurate. Dog Park, what's interesting is I'm going to read out what I kind of went out and found to describe it, and we'll go into deeper detail. Dog Park's a lot of cool stuff. So it's not like, okay, Terraform Mars is playing cards and that's pretty much it, or Raccoon Tycoon is pretty much auctioning stuff, getting resources to buy stuff. There's so much fun stuff. So I will try to capture it succinctly, and then we'll go a little deeper. So it's a midway competitive set collection and point-to-point movement game, which that just sounds great. Competitive set collection, point-to-point movement. I don't do a lot of pure point-to-point movement games. Clank is a movement game, but not a point-to-point movement game. So I think this may be one of the only ones we do that with. In the game, players take on the role of dog walkers who are going to recruit, walk, and care for their dogs over 4 rounds. Each round is split into 4 phases. There's the recruitment phase, which is essentially where you're going to add 2 dogs to your kennel. You're always going to add 2 dogs to your kennel. You actually make an offer because depending on number of players, there's a number of dogs out based on which ones you want to try to get. And you're actually offering reputation, which is your in-game points. So you're actually bidding points for which dog you want to get. Everyone will end up with 2 dogs during each recruitment phase. Selection phase is when you're going to choose which dogs to walk. Now, to walk those dogs, you have to have resources that basically pay for walking those dogs. Chew toy, a treat, a stick, a ball. So those are the resources you're paying for those. And when you do that selection phase, you're technically putting them on the lead, which is an important part of the game. There's the actual walking phase. And during the walking, even though you're walking 2 dogs, you're really just moving a meeple across a board. So they're journeying through the dog park with their fellow walkers, and they're collecting resources, possibly earning reputation, which again is points, and interacting with other walkers because you're walking on these spots on the board. And in the home time, which is the 4th phase, players earn reputation for their walk dogs and potentially lose reputation if they didn't walk those dogs in there. During the game, players must choose their routes and dogs carefully to earn the best reputation and prove they're the most accomplished walker of them all. At the end of the game, the player with the most reputation wins. Did I catch it? Has that kept your everything at a high level, Robbie?
Dude, it's perfect. It's perfect. If you, from the get-go, if you are a dog lover, this is your game.
Absolutely.
Like, I'll jump in on the wingspan adjacent to begin the discussion of it. I'll jump in on the wingspan adjacent type vibe because I truly think at this point in my life, I'm a wingspan lifer. And I realize I'm only like a little over a year into being a wingspan player, but I probably have played, not even probably, I have played, I think I've officially passed Smash Up in how many games of wingspan I've played. Because I've played a ton of them. And when I introduce people to wingspan now, I'm always like, okay. At this point, my fun that I make for myself if I'm playing wingspan for people for the first time is I pick an engine before I even see my starting hand. And I'm like, all right, I have to go forest this time. Like I have to. And then if I flip my cards over and it works, great. And if not, people are allowed, they'll have a chance because I'm going to have to look for them. But wingspan, I am not a birder. I say that as a man who literally has an owl tattooed on his arm. I'm not but I'm just not. Like, I'm not going to be the guy who's going to go to the park and I'm going to look for birds. Maybe when I get older and I have kids and they want to get into birding, like that may be a thing. Maybe when I retire, all that way down the road. But I'm not a birder. I don't know bird calls. I don't do all that. But I love dogs and I'm here for dogs. Wingspan can get super complicated in the engine building aspect because there are so few birds, even in the base deck, that do the same thing. So it's overwhelming looking at those resources, like looking at those and just trying to figure out what am I supposed to do to start. What I love about this game is dogs. You will know more. You probably know more about dog breeds than you would give yourself credit for. If you just exist in society, you will recognize so many of these dogs. And so there's a fun factor with that. Whereas like 90% of the birds you're going to see in wingspan, you're going to be like, I've never heard of that. Like, what a weird name for this bird.
So true.
So I love the connection there. The fact that there are lots of birds that have unique powers. There are lots of dogs that have unique powers. You're collecting them and bringing them into your kennel, into your environments. That's where the wingspan analogy really stops.
Yep.
Like because I would barely call this an engine builder. Like I would call it a combo game more than an engine builder.
Yep. I agree with that. And when I laid that out there about being wingspan adjacent, it was almost like a softball. So, cause I knew Robbie would jump in on that because it actually turned people off from dog park without playing it. But there's enough adjacencies that if there's certain things you like about wingspan, then there's aspects of dog park you will like. And there may be some things about wingspan you don't like that make dog park that much better for you. The artwork's great. Robbie hit the nail on the head. If you like dogs, two main points. If you like dogs, this is the game for you because there's so many dogs. I think every single card's unique. There's not two of the same dog in here, and there's 120 cards, like the Beagle or the English Setter or the Scottish Terrier, or like most of these you may know, but then some you've maybe never heard of. A Greenland dog, right? What's cool, and so that's one of the 2 points. The other one as well. And I just blanked on what my other one was. I will say this because I got distracted with my point I want to make. I like about this is that it has good flavor text on it as well. So you may know the Beagle, but then you can have like a little bit of learning stuff on the bottom of the Beagle card as well. But it takes away. Wingspan is very overwhelming. It's a heavy game. It's not a midway game. It is a heavy game because, like Robbie said, there's so many things, and engine builders are heavy because you got to think, I got to do this, to do this, to do this. At its heart, and Robbie said this is like a set collection deck game and a worker movement game more than anything else. The set collection is your worker movement is giving you start the game with resources. Your worker movement gives you resources, and the set collection, which is your sets of cards, may give you resources as well. You're using resources to get dogs, and then you're earning points and you're bidding those points to get more dogs. It's even though those 4 phases in the high level sounds like a lot, those phases are very quick. I bid on a dog. It's pretty quick. Do I want this dog or not? Okay, I'm going to bid this. Selecting the dog, it all goes pretty fast. The longest thing is when you actually go walk your dog. When you're walking your dog, and that's just the time it takes for a worker or really person to move their meeple to a spot. Okay, I'm going to get my ball. I'm going to get my stick or go from there. Those 4 phases, though they sound like a lot, are not that overwhelming because the limited, but not in a bad way, the limited choices you have and the clearly understood the actions you get to take during those times.
Yeah, it's so starting with the phases, you have the bidding phase at the top side of it, which is where there's dogs that are going to come out and you're going to decide which dog you want to recruit into your kennel. When Jason said it multiple times, it is a set collection game. The first time that I played this with Jason and Elizabeth, I did not view it as a set collection game. I viewed it as an engine builder. I wanted to get combo pieces going to make things effective. The other thing that I was told is, hey, it's really hard to get resources in this game. Like, you're going to struggle to get resources. And so little combo brain Robbie was like, I don't actually think it's that hard to get resources because this one plays into this one and this one plays into this one. And so we got to the end of the game and I was sitting on a mountain of resources and I didn't win. But it's because Elizabeth schooled me and Jason because her strategy from the get-go was set collection. So when we say set collection, on the side of the board, they have seven different types of dogs. Whether it's hounds, it can be
breeds of dogs. There's 7 different breeds. Yep.
Yeah, and so it's workers, it's there's all these different types
gun
of
dog,
dogs.
Utility, terrier, hound, pastoral, the breeds of dogs. Yep.
Yeah, so those are randomly chosen and placed on the side of the board before the game even before the first turn is taken. So on one game, pastoral dogs, whoever at the end of the game has the most pastoral dogs in their kennel gets 8 points. 12 point, whatever it is. So they get a ton of points. That's great. Now, the next game you play, pastoral dogs could be the lowest one where you only get 2 points. So it's not always like, oh, well, terriers are just always super overpowered. So I got to go for terriers every single game. So the game will adjust in that side. So I love that. And that's what Elizabeth schooled us on is she picked the top 3 and was like, I'm just going to only recruit those dogs. Whereas me and Jason were playing a completely different game and it didn't work. So then the next time I played, I was like, I wonder how much I'm going to feel this resource pinch if I go set collection. And I certainly felt it, but I also won handily because it was like, oh yeah, it's a set collection game. So I love that aspect of it. But one thing that is mentioned is you're going to bid points. You're going to bid reputation or what is
it's reputation.
Yeah, it's reputation. Yeah. So you bid reputation to recruit these dogs into your kennel, which is a really cool thematic element because in my mind, it was like, I'm going to walk these dogs around and show them off to the world. And so I'm trying to convince these dogs that it's worth being in my kennel. That's the reputation that I'm recruiting them with. But the bidding is done. You have these little these silent or these private bidding collections where you can bid up to 5 reputation.
Yeah, on a little dial.
Dog.
On a little dial, yeah.
That's hidden to you. And so you go in turn order and you say which dog you're going to bid on. So if I'm going to bid on the Rhodesian Ridgeback and I'm first up, I place my bidding counter face down with a predetermined number of that. Now, if Elizabeth was also, she's next, she's going to bid on the Rhodesian Ridgeback. She can adjust her bid because she knows that I've already bid on it. I cannot adjust my bid. So then if she wants to bid on it, or she can jump to another dog, and it goes around until everyone's bid. Whatever you've bid, whoever wins the bid, no matter what it is, even if you're by yourself, you lose that many points. So it's a really unique thing because you want to attract those in, but you can get caught in the weeds. And this is a tragic flaw that I have in any game where I'm bidding, is I overbid, especially when points are involved. 5 tribes, it kills me every game. So you have this bidding aspect that is super unique. Is that like private auction bid? Have you seen that in other games, Jason? Or like private, like knowledge bid, I guess, not auction bid.
I'm sure I have. I can't think of anything specifically off the top of my mind where it's a private one like that. There's probably a chance there's something. I like that. As like Terraforming Mars Ares of Expedition, whatever we talked about last time. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking. Libertalia. I love the mechanism of, hey, we're all gonna privately select something, reveal it, and then we can take actions on it, right? Dog Park's a little different because, like you said, everything stays private, but we do it in turn. So we know Robbie's going after the Hungarian Vizsla. I really want that, but what is he a big bidder, or is he like going low? Well, Robbie just admitted he bids high, and I always bid low. Even in 5 tribes, I will rarely bid unless I see the perfect move, right? I never bid in 5 tribes. I try to win off what I'm given. I don't always win a lot either for that. So, but I love that mechanism where we all privately decide, let's reveal it, and now we take that action. Super cool. I love it in the game for sure as well. I will point out in the 2-player version, I put a note down here. So that mechanism is super cool, and I'm jumping in kind of filling it for Robbie. So say 2 of us bid on the same thing. Say Robbie bids, he puts his dial face down. Elizabeth still does hers. We reveal it, and whoever won the bid, so say Robbie bid 4 and Elizabeth bid 2, he's going to pay 4 and get that dog. And Elizabeth now just has to spend 1 on any other dog that's left. So you're not punished if you lose that. And it's a key thing to remember. Like, it doesn't actually hurt you to go after a dog you want, because if you lose it, you're still going to get a dog, but you don't have to pay what you bid, but you have to pay at least 1. You still got to pay 1 to get that other dog. So you're still going to get a dog. So that I like that mechanism where you're not punished for bidding for something either. Like, because if I could have bid, you could have bid 4, I could have bid 3, and I lose the bid. Now I got to spend 3 on another dog. Well, you don't have to do that. It automatically defaults down to 1, and you get that other dog. So I like that mechanism in there for sure. But what I will point out in the 2-player game, this is the one thing, and I'm not massive fans of it, but I think they did a good way in here. You have to have an auto walker in there. So where basically you're essentially kind of controlling a third player for certain mechanisms. And one of those is bidding on a dog, where you roll the die and technically the dog goes out to whatever the highest breed that comes out. And so say in this game, Pastoral's 1, gun dog and terriers or hound dogs. And if the pastoral dog is ever out, it'll automatically going left to right. The auto player will automatically go to that dog. And so Liz and I house ruled that, and we roll a die instead, just so, because that way you start gaming the game if you know if the auto worker is always going to go to the highest breed, if that makes sense. I went really tactical on that. If you haven't played the game, it won't make a lot of sense. But that's my bigger way of saying, if you need to house rule a rule in a game to make it more fun, house rule that rule to make it more fun.
Yeah.
Just remember, other people may not necessarily. So if you play that game with someone else and you're playing this house rule, point out that, because not everybody's a house ruler. It took me a while to accept that it's okay to slightly change a rule if that's going to make the game more fun. My most common one is in Wingspan. You're supposed to choose your bonus card at the very beginning. You're given 2 in-game bonus cards. You choose one. Our house rule is we do that after the second round ends. You turn a card in. So that way you're not stuck with, I'm supposed to have birds with the bacon egg, or I call it the bacon nest, and I can't get a single bird with a bacon nest in it, right? Because none of them come out. Yeah. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but never feel bad about house ruling a rule to make the game a little more fun. Just know you're not playing it by the designer's rules. That's okay. If that means you're having more fun in your group playing it by doing something slightly different, then do that all the way. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on the tangent.
No, because we played a 2-player game because you had described this auto walker to me, and I was like, if I am going to talk about this game in its entirety, I feel like I need to see this side of it, and especially as someone who plays a lot of 2-player games, I wanted to know where it stacks up. 100% modify that walker, modify it, because if you're not careful about that, like that auto walker can rack up some points, and like they can do some damage. So it's like, okay, we don't want to come in third place and someone comes in first, someone comes in third, and then like the auto walker, like we just look over and we're like, oh, that thing just kind of trumped me. Tough. So I don't love that. That to me is the biggest weakness of the game, is the auto walker. But I also agree, at 2 players, you have to have a third mixed in. So I think 3 is a sweet player count. I would be very curious to play this at 4. But so once you recruit them into your kennel, you decide who you're putting on the lead. You pay resources. The resources of this game, once again, if you're a dog lover, these resources, chef's kiss. So adorable. Because how many games do we play that the resources are wood, there's an ore of some sort, there's a wool or a sheep or a livestock, like the resources are so flat across so many board games, because normally they're building resources.
Right, yeah.
So that makes sense. I think it's one of the refreshing parts about Wingspan is you have like a bird, or you have like a worm, you have a fish, you have a rodent. Like that's super cool. And this game, it's a dog game.
Yep.
What do dogs love? Okay, well, squishy, like a little squeaky toy. Okay, that's a resource. Tennis ball, that's a resource. A stick, a dog bone, like that is so excellent of resources. And so your dogs will require X amount of resources in order to be put on a lead. So you could get a really powerful dog that has a really cool action. One of the ones that comes to mind, and this will make more sense in the next phase, is the next phase where you're actually walking the dog, is the push your luck portion of the game. So you kind of risk, if you're the last one, if you push your luck too hard, there is actually a penalty. But there are dogs who have a power to override that penalty, which means at that point, you're not really pushing your luck that much. You're just strolling through the park.
Yep.
But that dog is pretty powerful, so it requires a lot of resources in order to be walked. I think the walking to, like, the power of the dog to the resource ratio is the most well-balanced part of this game by far. Because a dog with a basic ability may not even cost, like, it may be a resource to walk that dog. That makes sense, because sometimes you just want to be walking the dogs to get some resources for better dogs down the road. And that way you're not stuck at home not walking dogs. So that phase goes really fast, and then you head into like the walking phase. Jason, I'm gonna let you describe this one, because I tried describing it to someone the other day and I failed miserably.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty cool. I mean, it is, I say, like, it is, Robbie's correct. The getting your dogs, bidding on dogs, putting the offers in is pretty quick, especially once you know the game. You're like, okay, well, I'll see what that dog does. Okay, you're thinking about whatever. You do the bid, you do that. And then you go to the walk phase. So the walk phase on the board, in the middle of the board, there's basically spaces that show resources on there. One may be a wood, the stick that the dog wants to chew with. One is the ball. One is a chew toy. And so in turn order, you're going to move your little dog, dog owner and dog to a spot, right? You can go up to 4 spots away. I think it is 1 to 4 spots away or 1 to 3 spots away. And you're going to take the bonuses there. So say I take the very first spot and it's a stick, I get a stick. So now the next person who comes, if they come to my spot, they actually have to give up a reputation because probably thematically, because they're messing around with other dogs, not doing their own thing. So like if Robbie goes first and goes to the wood spot and I really want to get a stick for my dog, I have to now move my dog meeple there. I get a stick, but I have to give up a reputation, i.e. an in-game victory point. Or I could move past Robbie and just go to the ball spot on the next one. Now, what's cool about this, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, but the dog abilities are all over the place. One Robbie talked about was that they don't lose points if they're the last one walking. There's multiple ones of these different dogs, but have the same ability. And that is you don't pay reputation if you stop on a spot with someone else. Again, those people cost more. I have one right here. It's a Basset Griffin Vendine Petite, which is and so the beardly social butterfly. So basically when they walk and stop with someone else, you don't have to give up a reputation for that. So what the push your luck side of it is, what's cool on this one, there's one path. The first 5 spots or 4 spots are the same, but then there's 2 divergent paths that you can go off. One that has just spots where you get points for stopping at it, and one that has double up spots. So one is like a double stick spot. One is another ball spot. So you actually choose which path you want to go. You're all going to go to the end spot, the same end place when you leave the park and stop walking. But you now have to decide, do I want to go more point heavy or do I want to go more resource heavy based on which path I take? And when Robbie was talking about the push your luck aspect of it, so at the end on the board, there are 4 spots that you'll end up at when you stop walking. So after you leave the last spots, the first one is like 2 points or 3 points if it's a 4-player game. The second one is like 2 points. Or that's the first one in a 3-player game. The third one is 1 point, or the ability to swap a dog, which we'll talk about in a second. And the last one is actually minus 1 point. So if you're the last one walking, so say it's a 4-player game, if all 3 people have left the park, then you're done as well. You don't get to keep walking while they go. The moment in a 4-player game, the moment that third person leaves the park, the last person leaves it as well, and they automatically go to that minus 1 point spot, unless you're walking a dog that lets you not do that. So that's a cool thing too. The heavier level of strategy is, as the game goes, like we said, you're going to get 2 dogs every time. And by default, the most amount of dogs you can walk are 3. Now you're still only using 1 meeple, but technically you have the ability of all 3 of those dogs each time. But you may own a dog that you don't have to pay a point if you're the last one in there. But if you're not walking them that round, you don't get that ability. So you only get the abilities of the dogs you're walking that round. So the 4th round, you're going to have 8 dogs no matter what, but only the 3 you're able to walk, or maybe 4 if there's a special ability to do that, will actually have that ability. So that kind of comes into play as well. I like that it's more than just, hey, I got this dog and I walk it. What am I want to do this round? Some dogs may give you a bonus. If you stop at a stick spot, you also get a ball or whatever that may be. The last thing I'll talk about walking the dogs is there's each game, and some we've already talked a little bit about the replayability with the way the dog breed priorities for in-game points come. There's also these, what's the words I use? Location bonuses. So like each of those locations have set things every single game. But also in the game, you're going to turn over a card that's a location bonus that adds additional bonuses to different spots on the board that change every round. So one round, this particular spot may have a ball, and this other spot may have a victory point. And so when you stop there, you get both of those things. I like, and it changes up from the top path to the lower path. I like the fact that tons of replayability with that, because you may never know where those spots are at, and you may not necessarily know, and they may hit at a place you want it to be, or it may hit a place you don't want it to be. And then on a lower play count, it actually blocks spots as well. There's spots that get blocked that you may really have wanted to be able to do, but it blocks it for that turn. So hopefully I explained that. You're walking through, gaining your resources, but then there's some nuances to how you interact with other people, and then how you leave the park to finish your walk.
Yeah. Like in the game that we played the game we played up there, Jason was going basically one at a time. Like very rarely was he jumping the full 4 spaces of movement, Whereas the latter half of the resources, there's a little bit more there.
Yep.
Or there's specific ones. And so I was usually jumping pretty fast to get to there. And it always felt like Elizabeth went to the top half of the path. I went to the bottom half of the path. And we just kind of walked down there and saw how it shook out. And so that's where that push your luck element of like, ooh, that last space on the lower path is 2 dog bones. That's pretty nice to get. But now that I look, Elizabeth and Jason are both, if I stop at that space, they both could exit out of the park on their next turn. So do I want those 2 dog bones or do I want to go ahead and jump out of the park? So I love that the replayability not only changes based on the bonus spaces or like the bonus items that you get, but also in who you're playing with. Because like when Lindsay and I played, it was, you were just like, we had so many, the resources were easier to come across because no one was really jumping like 2 to 3 spaces.
Right.
It was just like, I'm going to jump 1. All right. She'll jump to the next. And we just leapfrogged each other all the way out of the park. Like, and we just watched the auto walker just take off. And it was like, all right, you go do your thing. We're not worried about you.
Yeah.
Like game on. So it's very, I love that side of things. I love how much points are just being thrown around in the game. It feels very willy-nilly for the first 3 rounds. And then that 4th round, you get out there and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I definitely don't need to stop to get this ball or whatever because I don't want to give up a point for it. Like that's difficult. Another thing that I really like about this and why it feels much more like set collection instead of an engine builder is in an engine builder, traditionally you're going to find 1 or 2 pieces that are really strong and you build around that, right? Like a good engine has a strong core. But because you get punished for having dogs in your kennel, after you walk the dog, or when you put it on a lead, it's going to have a collar. And any dogs in your kennel that don't have a collar on them at the end are going to lose you points during the home phase. And this will kind of transition us to there in that final phase. So you get points for walking your dogs, but also you lose points. So if you recruit this dog into your kennel, this super high point resource, this super high resource heavy dog, and you don't walk it, you're going to lose points for that. So it's worth getting the resources to sort of target that dog, get that dog walked. That's super important for not losing points in the end game. But also, let's say you have one dog that's like super, super good, or you love its power or something like that. There's little benefit to just running that dog or walking that dog every single round.
Yep.
So I like that this game pushes you to diversify in what dogs you're walking, which also changes how you approach the walking phase. Because like we talked about, if you have that dog that means, okay, when I'm last out of the park, I don't get penalized. Okay, you could choose to walk that dog every single time, but it's going to take probably 3 resources in order to do that. And then you also want to be walking 2 more dogs that you just got.
Yep.
So if you're that heavy on resources, sure, that sounds great, but it's going to be tough to maintain that for 4 rounds.
Yeah.
So
well,
I like that it pushes you around.
I agree. You captured it well because it's not an engine builder game. But with the dogs having abilities, for those of us who like engine building games, it's kind of like an engine that you can run, but you're not running it over and over because it pushes you, to use your words, to not run that same dog over and over. But if you do, you're doing it at the expense of something else, right? You're making a tactical decision to be like, because you have to get it 2 dogs. You can't choose not to get 2 dogs. So that forces you to kind of think through, do I run this one dog every time, or do I just run them once and then make sure I walk everybody each time? It's the dog abilities will affect that as well, because some of the dog abilities are just at the end of the game. Like some of these are like, you get 2 points for every single gun dog you have. Like that's one of the abilities. 2 points for every utility dog you have. Here's one for obedient. When walking this dog, whenever you gain 1 or more balls, you also gain a reputation. So while you're out walking, you can get points just for stopping at the ball spot. But this Korean Jindo costs 3 resources, a wood and 2 treats. Well, that's a lot. So I love the variety of those things. During selection, here's one, an eager dog. During selection, so that's when you're choosing to pay the resources. You pay a resource for this Samoyed. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. A wood and a chew toy, but you get a dog bone for it. Love the fact, okay, that's kind of like an engine. So maybe you run the Samoyed every time. Now, granted, you got to make sure you have a wood and a chew toy, but then now you're getting a dog bone for it. So I like the fact, as you said, that it forces you not to go deep with just one thing, because you can't really, because of the variety of those ones. Any game with cards in it, you have to live with the cards that come out. Another thing we didn't talk about either, each of those 4 rounds has what's called a forecast card. So it's basically a condition for each of those rounds. The condition and the conditions are very widely. Most of them are nice, but there's a couple of them that are actually a little negative, which again, you could house rule and just take those out. Some of the reviewers I watched said, oh yeah, I just take those out. Like, for example, one is every unwalked dog. So every dog that you haven't walked at least once during the game, instead of getting -1 point, is -2 points. Well, there's no reason you have to do that. If that one is the random one, just don't play that one, right? But they're typically good. So for some of them, maybe for every unwalked dog, you don't lose points for it this round, right? That's a good one to have early or late. A few of them are, hey, you just get straight up points for the number of pastoral dogs that are in your kennel at the end of this round. A wide variety of those forecast cards. And that's definitely something from a game maker. You could just add a ton of those to change that game up. Another example of how the replayability of this game is crazy high, with the number of dogs that are there, the way the forecast cards are different each time, the players you're playing, the location event cards, like the randomized event things that happen, those bonus on there. Each game can be so different from that. We've played 4 games in BG Stats. 3 of them were 2-player and 1 of them was 3-player. So I haven't done a 4-player game. But it wouldn't, in my mind, it wouldn't make it a super long game, especially if you know the game, because almost all your actions are fast. I will bring up it's a half critique of it. So there's an ability we haven't talked about yet when you're walking that's called scouting. I think this was just thrown on later on to make it more gamified. This is a Jason word, right? I actually don't, and it doesn't totally make sense. And it doesn't make the game hard, but it now throws this extra level of strategy that can slow the game down just a bit, right? I rarely scout, but what scouting is, when you go walk your dog, there's a spot that has an icon that's called scout. What it lets you do is actually look at the top 2 or top 3 cards of the deck just to see what's coming out. And then it's 2 cards. And then if you want to, you can replace one of the, so what we didn't say was that after we've gotten your second card, you did reveal 3 more cards. So you know what 3 cards are going to be available next round. When you go walk, you can, if you go to that spot, scout, choose 2 off the top of the deck, and then choose to replace one of those that are going to be in the next round with a card. I'm sure you could go deep into the thematics of it, but to me, that's an extra level of strategy that is heavier than this game needed. And that's a me thing for sure. Like I say, I don't scout a lot. Elizabeth does because she's a deep strategist on those kinds of things. So for me, it felt like they added on, we need to make it a little more crunchy. So let's throw the scout ability on there. Now it's cool because you're really affecting the game and you're changing the game board. But for a game that I think is mid-light to midweight to lightweight, this extra level strategy throws it up a little bit more crunchy than I'd like it for newer players. What do you think about that, Robbie?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that the scouting feature, if I were playing this game with non-gamers, I would just ignore the scouting feature. Mm-hmm. Like I would just straight up just not have it. Like, yes, if you stop at that space, like here's what we'll do. Because I'm pretty sure the scout space on all of them is like it's always by itself. Like I can't think of a scout space that like has another thing with it as well. So what I would do is like I would just say round 1 it's going to be a ball, round 2 it's going to be a stick, round 3 it's going to be a chew toy, round 4 it's going to be a bone or whatever.
Good idea.
And like replace it so that space has some variance to it. Because I agree, if you're playing with a bunch of gamers, then okay, cool. Like I'm looking at Jason's board or his kennel. I'm looking at Robbie's kennel, and I'm seeing, all right, they both have 2 gun dogs apiece. Well, I already have 3. So, and there's 1 more gun dog that's going to be available in this final round. So I'm going to go ahead and scout, and whatever comes up, I'm just going to get rid of that other gun dog so that they can't catch me on gun dogs, because that's just points that I'm handing over to them, kind of a deal. So it does slow things down, because AP, that analysis paralysis, is certainly something that this game doesn't really struggle with, because the actions are all so simple.
Yeah.
Until you add scouting in.
Yep.
Like, the longest I feel like you're really processing what am I going to do is the bidding phase.
Yep.
Because when you're walking the dogs, it's just, I think I'm going to stop for a ball. Jason stopped for a ball. Do I really need that ball? I don't think I need that ball at the cost of a point. So I'm going to go for the chew toy right next to it. Like, those decisions happen that fast. I think you could play this with the most crunchiest players, and they're going to move through, because at the end of the day, most of the points come from the end of the game scoring, things like that. So I love how all of that goes. There is also hidden objective cards. Talk about variables that make replayability higher as well. We haven't talked about this, but every player has a scoring, like a hidden scoring goal that you're working on. None of these, reading through the deck, none of them seem to be game changers. Like, you're not going to win based on these hidden objectives, unlike a wingspan or something like that, where it's like, oh, if you go with the life wingspanners, people will pull. What's crazy to me, Jason, I've seen someone posted a game, they scored 42 points off of hidden objectives.
Dang.
Like those bonus cards.
Yeah.
That is baffling to me.
Yeah.
Like, how you could A, get that many cards, and B, fulfill the requirements to actually capitalize on those points. So for these, it's going to be like, you get 2 points per gun dog that you have. You get, like, if you have 10 collars or 10 leads in your kennel, you get 6 points. Like something like that. So it's very minimal points. Now, the point spread usually ends up pretty tight if everyone's playing a heads-up game. So those 6 points matter. I'm not trying to say that it's not like you should just ignore them, but it's truly, you're not going to win solely off of, I completed this hidden objective. So I think there is a lot to this game in terms of your ability to dive in and enjoy it on a deep level. But at the end of the day, it's very simple and straightforward. Jason, do you want to dive into to Cookie?
Yeah.
You want to go first?
Let me go. I'll go first for sure. You said it right. Like, AP is not an issue for sure, except for the scout. The scout can slow down, because for hardcore crunchy folks, Robbie actually described the perfect example. There's 4 of us. Okay, there's the dog breed percentages. Now you have 2 terriers, I have 2, and I'm thinking, and so literally you could just sit there and you're waiting. It's not their fault, right? Because they're literally doing the math in their head on their last turn. Okay, or if they do it on the first turn, okay, now you're just being frustrating because they're doing it on the first turn. But by the 4th turn, hey, they're trying to win the game. So you take out the scout. Doing that, I hadn't thought about that, but 100%, if I teach this game to new players, I will just say that very thing. We'll change the resource every time and not scout at all, because it doesn't add to the game for a newer player for sure. Now, having said that, I don't know if I'll teach this game to new people. I like Dog Park, and I become especially with people I played with lately, when I talk about some of my games, if I were a newer player or my kids were younger, this would be a game that hit the table a lot for us, right? Because there's enough little things in there. You're teaching set collection, you're teaching resource management, you're teaching private hidden goals, you're teaching situations based on every round those situations being different, right? Teaching bidding. How much do I push my luck? How much do I bid? A lot of little bitty things that are in games all over the place are in this. Beautiful artwork. I mean, I love dogs. Like my dogs love you. They're awesome dogs. Love my dogs. We're always going to have dogs. We've always been dog people. Love so many things about it. But because I have so many other games, I just don't see myself pulling this out just to play it with me and Elizabeth, or me, you and Elizabeth, right? Because I have so many other ones. Yeah. So it's, for me, this is tough. It's definitely not, it's between I keep going back and forth this. I'm going to go peanut butter cookie for me. So it's not, again, that doesn't mean it's a bad game, right? By any stretch of the imagination, does that mean it's bad? But for me in my life, it's a peanut butter cookie all the way. If anybody wants to play it, if someone comes over, if someone listens to this podcast, Dakota says, hey, I want to play Dog Park. Anybody else wants to play Dog Park? I will happily pull it out and happily play it. But rarely will it be a game I bring out. At least when I think about my last 2 years here and the newer players I brought over to play, unless I know they're a dog person, totally different situation. If you're a dog person and you want to learn games, this is going to be the first one I pull out because it's such a great game for doing those things. But I own so many games. I own so many games I'd rather play. If this was in my collection 10 years ago and my kids are younger, it easily stays to the top and plays a lot. Right now, it won't get played a lot, and there's a good chance I bought 2 copies of it from my Kickstarter. I already sold one, and my opened copy I will probably sell very soon because it just won't get played at my house, right? I'm doing a big culling, which is a separate situation altogether. But it's a peanut butter cookie, great game. People want to play it. I'll happily play it, but it's not one that I would pull out. What do you guys say?
Yeah, yeah, I completely get that. So my game collection is maybe half the size of Jason's, if not smaller. And for me, like I said, I walked away from this trip and we played 3 different games, and I came home having purchased. We played a lot more than 3 games, but there were 3 games on this trip alone that I played at Jason's that I bought all 3. So Dog Park was up there because we also, dog family, my dogs decided to partake in the episode. Actually, I'm sure you would have heard them barking at some point. I had to mute my audio. My dogs are an active part of my life. One day I hope to have kids in the future, and they will be raised in a dog household. Yep. And I want to raise them to be gamers. And so unlike Jason raising his kids 20 years ago, there is this world of this game didn't exist 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think this will be a game that I will introduce my kids to gaming with, like as they start to adopt it, because they're going to love dogs. For me, it comes in as a chocolate chip. I don't want to push it all the way to a double doozy. And the only reason that I'm not pushing it to a double doozy is just because it's a little too simple to be a lifer game. Like, it's not the game that I'm sitting there. For me, almost every double doozy that we've talked about, I am truly the only one that I've assigned a double doozy to that I would go back and I might readjust is I called Herstory a double doozy, and I might pull that down to a chocolate chip in reflection because of this one. Yep. I'm a processor. I'm a verbal processor. I love to process out loud, but every game that I play, I like to just kind of replay it in my head as I'm going to sleep. Like, okay, what this turn went here, this turn did this, and I replay them. Double doozies to me, I can remember my moves a week out from the game because I'm like, that was it. That was it. That was it. Like I'm replaying them over and over again just because I love the crunchiness of being able to process. Okay, I could legitimately play that better. There's just not the deep depth of that in Dog Park. Now, that's to say it's still a phenomenal game, and I understand that I have a problem. So, like, that's an issue that I have to deal with, and I love to process games that way.
Yeah.
So, for many of you as listeners, especially trying to get into gaming, this shouldn't be a deterrent at all. I would be, if you love dogs, I would be shocked if you got this game and it wasn't a double doozy for you.
Yep.
Ryan and Abby are our neighbors. I had them over and we played New York Zoo. I talked about it a couple episodes ago. Man, they love their dog Pepper. Shout out to Pepper. They're going to love this game.
Yep.
It's going to be perfect. They played 5 Tribes, and 5 Tribes was like a little on the high end for them. This, to me, brings the bidding mechanic of 5 Tribes into a more understandable game. My friends Tyler and Jenny are the type of people that at a party are super quiet and super reserved, but as soon as the animal gets let out of its crate and they get to walk around, they'll talk to that dog more than they'll talk to anyone else in the room. They are going to love this game. So the theming, it's unreal. It's so good. It's easy to dive in. It has enough crunch that experienced gamers are going to love it.
Yep.
Like I said, it's just missing a little bit of depth for me to call it and it's not because my collection's too large. Like, we'll definitely introduce people and we'll show this. Like, so Jason and I have critiques for different reasons of this, but at the end of the day, neither of us are going to be like, oh, you want to play Dog Park? Nah, I'm just out. Like, hard pass. Like, it's not even a game. There are games that I would feel that way, but I would still gladly teach people and let y'all play it, and I'll just run the game. I have several games like that in my collection that I love to show people, but I don't really want to play it. I want you guys to play it and enjoy it. I feel like I'm just part of Dog Park. I not only want to show it to you, I want to be in it. I want to be playing with you. I want to be walking them dogs. So, yeah, that's Dog Park. So, Jason, any closing remarks? Any final thoughts? I guess we didn't really talk price on this.
Yeah,
if you want to hit price.
Yeah, I will say this: if there's and it's not downside is not the right term, right? But this is definitely the full price of this game is $60, and on Amazon it's full price $60. Now, it's hard to conceptualize this as a new gamer, but you get so many wooden bits in that game, and we didn't even talk about it. You get game trays, these little plastic trays that separate everything. That's really a lot of the reason why the cost is as high it is. Because $60, I acknowledge that's a lie. It's maybe the highest game we've had that's what the price it is. If you go to some of the board game sites like Game Nerds or Miniature Market, some of the other ones like that, you'll find it for $48. Most of those have their by default. Most of their games are like 20% off because as a retailer they can do those things. So if there's if there's a true knock, it's that it's the full price on Amazon. So I'm a big Amazon shopper. Let's be clear, right? So, yeah. But it makes sense. The price is what it is because the production value is so great. The art is so great. The game trays and the wood bits. Don't let that scare you off, but I totally understand if it's a little too much for you right now. But if you are a dog lover and you're getting into games, this is kind of that game for sure. I did have a random thought too that you mentioned, and we'll talk a little bit more off air because I want to tell you something. But at some point, and it may be after 50 episodes or whatever, we should do some sort of list where we re-rate. We talk about games that are a different rating now, something like that, right? We think about our primary games, our featured games, and which ones, maybe we pick 5 or something, and are they the same rating or have they gone up or gone down, right? Her Story is an example for you. For me as well, recency bias is an okay thing, right? Recency bias is a real thing, and it's an okay thing, right? And I'll tell you off air about my other one that anyway, but I like the idea of reevaluating the games we've talked about to see maybe they've gone up because of play, maybe they've gone down because of play, or maybe they stayed right where they at because we had it perfect that first time. So at some point in the future, would definitely love doing an episode like that.
Yeah, I'm here for it because you get excited, you get in the moment, and at the end of the day, we're not professionals here, people. We are yep. enthusiasts discussing. I don't know how you become a board game professional. So if there's some sort of test, sure, I'll take it. I'm a disc golf professional because I had $75. But that's a whole other world. So we are grateful to y'all. On that, on the components piece, I'll tell you, from someone who has a very large gaming table and struggles to divert resources evenly to both sides. Like, I like my square table. I built my square table for One Night Ultimate Werewolf. Like, that is why I chose the size and shape of table I did, is for that game, because its flaws, everyone needs to be able to reach into the middle without disturbing other people. Right. Whereas if we did, Jason has a rectangular table, if you're on the end, it would get tough to swap other people's stuff across the table. So I went with the square. Sharing resources, unless I just have an absurd number of them, without fail, people are having to pass resources the whole time. Every single game I play. Dog Park has 2 separate trays that are full of resources. What a saving grace. Especially when we played, I wasn't feeling great. So Jason and Elizabeth had their own little pool of resources. I'm on the other side of the table. it was a great time. So we appreciate y'all. We appreciate you for being here and listening and supporting once again. We wouldn't I'll say Jason and I would still talk about a lot of board games, but we would get to spend less time talking if it wasn't for your support and what you guys are doing. So we're very grateful to y'all and for everything that you do. And yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you in episode 22 for our next episode.
See ya.